Got it.
All right. Yeah, I feel like my voice is a little fried from our group Dust Bowl Revival just did a whole blowout show with the Troubadour in LA.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, the first like real full show in like a long time. And like, was it a bit self-indulgent? Yes. Like, did we play for like 2.5 straight hours? Kind of.
That's okay. I think it's okay to indulge, especially
Sometimes
after 2020.
You got to just go all in. All right. Let's start from the top. Tell us where you are, who you are, and what you do, who you're a part of.
I am in Birmingham, Alabama. I am Paul of St. Paul and the Broken Bones, and I roll around on the floor and scream in that band.
Now, you may not remember this, but I did an interview with you, God, ages and ages ago, the week that you were officially quitting the bank.
Oh, wow.
As a teller, when I think your first maybe EP was starting to get some notice, and you were like, yeah, like I'm thinking about finally just doing it. Like I'm going to give notice, and I'm not sure if this is the right move. I think we can all agree it was probably the right move.
It was the right move. No, there's no doubt about that. At the time, it was very scary because, I mean, to be fair, the reason we were so busy, but we were also getting interest from booking agents and had a manager on board, and so it made sense. So you kind of might as well go for it. But yeah, that was a very different time. But I would say yes, it ended up being a good decision.
And Alien Coast comes out in January. Let's just say that this interview is actually happening now in January, or just saying that like this probably will come out then. But
right,
it's top secret. But I've heard it, and man, it's a whirlwind tour through I would say a pretty intense, almost like demonic view of planet Earth and space, almost like we're going in different realms at the same time. And I'm really impressed at how expansive your world sonically has become.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely we definitely kind of experimented and kind of did kind of whatever we wanted to do. And when we first came out, it was we kind of leaned on what we, as far as our past and those kinds of things. And I think, we've kind of made a transition over time to kind of be able to explore all of our influences. And this record definitely is kind of a culmination of those things.
Right.
And it definitely explores a lot of different territory that I don't think we've explored previously.
I wonder if like we went into that song Popcorn Ceiling for a second, if it felt maybe after it came out or after you heard the final result, if it reminded you of like an alternate reality Rocket Man, like Elton John, but like on another dimension, capturing the sort of loneliness of isolation, maybe trying to like tell that person you love who's so far away that you love them, and maybe not knowing if that message is ever going to get through.
I mean, I would take that as a compliment for sure. I think there's definitely an element. I mean, part of it is like an element of relief that you're kind of, because that's kind of the point where like the fever dream kind of stops within the record. So you can hear like the opening of that. There's a breath. It's like, and then then the realization comes to where you're just like, oh, I'm just in some terrible hotel, lonely, sad, staring up at a ceiling, trying to figure, you know what I mean? Like trying to figure things out. So Yeah, there's definitely a lot of kind of loneliness and sadness in that for sure. And longing that yeah, that I yeah, I love that song.
But in a way, a lot of this record sort of came to be in moments of isolation, on the road, stuck in a hotel room somewhere far away from the ones you love. And it is sort of the sacrifice that a lot of us make when you actually are pursuing your dream, right? You're out there, you're opening for the fucking Rolling Stones. Now, it all seems glorious to a lot of other people, right? But it is a job that takes its toll. And this sort of alternate reality that we all kind of create when we're traveling 150, 200 days a year, you can't ever get your comfort zone back in a way, right? You're
Yeah, I always compare it to
always in a new
Never.
place.
Yeah, I always compare it to Neverland and like Peter Pan because a bunch of adults can act like children. You know what I mean? And they never like there are responsibilities, but then you do kind of realize you're like, man, this it can't. Yes, there is a price to be paid with those things. But at the same time, like I'm not complaining. It's what I do for a living. But yeah, definitely you have those moments, whether you be on tour. It happens to me more in Europe because you
Mm,
are, in those kinds of places because you're just like, you are stuck in some shitty hotel or something, and you're like, what am I doing? And so yeah, I think that's definitely part of the idea is the isolation you kind of feel, and I think everybody thinks that you're supposed to feel a certain way, like very lucky and fortunate, and I do feel those things, but I also feel sometimes very lonely and very isolated, and kind of which some of the records about is kind of experiencing things through a haze where you're not
yeah,
fully coming to grips with what's happening. You have things happen at such a clip that it's hard to really digest what happened. It's
right.
just every night, everything, something happening, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think those are definitely in this record for sure.
Well, especially someone like you who gives so much of himself to the audience every single night. You're wringing yourself out to the point where, I've seen you at a festival here and there, and it's like I get exhausted just watching you as a fellow performer, right? I felt the same way watching Bradley, what's his name at the who passed away, the Daptone guy, Charles Bradley,
Yeah,
right? Just seeing that switch turn on, where this sort of gentle guy who you talk to backstage all of a sudden is a shouting preacher of soul, right?
right,
He's floating through the crowd on some other plane, but then eventually you have to come down from that plane where you're climbing up on the speakers and sort of bringing people on this journey into your mind, right?
right.
Is there a point where you walk on stage where you feel that switch turn on and then you have to turn it off, or is it just part of you now?
I mean, I think it's definitely a switch still. You know what I mean? I feel like there's a difference. It's my kind of 45 minutes to an hour and a half of therapy in a
Uh-huh.
way. And yeah, I always kind of feel like you've got to immerse yourself in it. I kind of compare it to method acting.
Yeah.
You really do have to immerse yourself and become that whatever that character is or whoever that performer is. And I certainly go all in for sure. And so yeah, it is. I mean, to me, it is a switch. The moment you hit the stage, it's a different thing. And the moment you get off,
Right.
there is a switch there. It's a weird thing, but I've never been. I don't think it really carries over typically. I do feel like sometimes when you're after, like immediately after the show, and people want to talk to you, it's kind of like cool, which I have zero issues with it. It's just you're just kind of in a haze. You gotta, you just kind of you're not really experiencing anything at that point, because you just had this endorphin rush. So it's interesting, but with that kind of rush, there's also a letdown. So, but yeah, I definitely immerse myself, if fully for sure. I always feel like after a show, I've got hit by a train. And
Yeah.
that's the best way I can describe it.
Well, you grew up in a small town in Alabama, and I've read obviously that you considered becoming a Pentecostal preacher and all that. But I think the thing that struck me is that more so the preaching and the performance of that person who's leading the charge through his church, that actually maybe affected you as a performer more than the music that was being sung, right? I actually kind of felt the same way growing up in Chicago, where we would go to this church, totally different type of church, but I would watch the minister and see how he could spellbind the audience, right? Whether it was through humor and through the teachings of Jesus or whatever, none of that really resonated with me. I wasn't like, oh my God, I have to follow Jesus, but I loved following him through his stories, right?
Right.
And seeing how the audience was transfixed each Sunday. That was like a very powerful thing. You could say the same thing about a great stand-up comedian, a magician, a single guitar player who can bring you in through a solo, and I think that's something that maybe you didn't realize when you started performing, but like you're preaching a sort of gospel now as you've become a more educated and enlightened person, right? Like you have some pretty intense ideas that you're bringing us on. I mean, Young Sick Camellia, your last record before this new one, we brought, you sort of brought us into the world of Caravaggio, right?
Yeah.
You are bringing us into this new world on Alien Coast of Italian sculpture and, again, like alternate reality Greek mythology, right?
Yeah.
And I think many people see you guys as like, oh yeah, they're that. They see you guys as like this rambunctious Southern soul group,
Right.
one section, and the guy who wears a sequined cloak and goes nuts on stage. But really, this is a very erudite journey that we're going on in Alien Coast.
Yeah. I mean, I always, it's weird because you don't want to over intellectualize much, like you don't want to go too far up your own ass. Um, but at the same time, like to me, it's still an art, and it's something that where I can draw inspiration from, whether it be like there's one song on the record called Bermejo and the Devil, and Bermejo was a Spanish painter, and the devil is this Saint Michael triumphs over the devil, and it's this painting I saw in London that's amazing, but it's beautiful, but the devil is horrifying, and I always thought like that would be like a part of my nightmares. But yeah, I mean, we explore a lot of different territory lyrically. It's funny. I always like the juxtaposition. I'm just that kind of person. I can talk to you about, Caravaggio, but I can also talk to you about professional wrestling. So that's really kind of who I am. So lyrically and what we explore through the music um, can kind of be a lot of those kinds of things. And I think if you just hear it on the surface level, you go, oh, well, that's a fun little dance song, or that, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those, I kind of enjoy that because fans of yours and bands and things I'm a fan of, I always found it interesting when there was a little bit more to it than just
Yeah.
a love song or just and I always found that really interesting. And sometimes I feel like maybe I overcompensate because I'm from a small town in the South, and I think everyone just assumes I'm a dumbass, and you know, so maybe you feel like you have to overcompensate for that. But I maybe that's a subconscious thing that I'm not aware of. But I know that I find inspiration. I find more inspiration in going to an art museum than I do listening to a record anywhere.
Hmm.
And that's just for some reason it speaks to me differently, and it speaks to me on a creative level. So I think that's a interesting journey, and I assume there's probably people that don't think that that's the case for us. You know.
Well, I noticed that throughout some of the songs on this record, there's almost the ominous narrator that comes in and out of songs. It's like a whispering, it's like a sort of this demonic, hushed storyteller that's kind of going in one ear and like trying to convince you to go on this trip, you know?
Sure.
Um, and it's funny because the end of that song, Bermejo and the Devil, there's this Spanish guitar kind of outro. And it reminds me of the imagery and sort of the vibe of Lil Nas X, you know, some of his recent stuff where, again, he's taking us on this trip where we fall in love with the devil and have relations with the dark side, you know, you know. And again, he's like the biggest pop star in the world almost right now, but he's opening up this idea of myth and human sacrifice and um you know people are like both appalled but also like very intrigued, I think. And it's awesome to see, I think, music in maybe the soul and funk world and music in the pop world diving into some really intense subjects, right? I don't think most soul bands are familiar with, you know, Bartolome. You know, I think the most soul bands aren't going to be familiar with Barmejo's work, you know. But if maybe some people hear you talk about how art can really move you, maybe they'll go to that museum and look at these paintings and start creating something on their own. Because we all
Yeah.
need springboards. We need like those moments of transfixion where we can realize like, oh, this world is much bigger than just me getting up in the morning and having to pay the water bill and, you know, walk the dog. Because we get sucked into these tiny little worlds, especially during the pandemic where our worlds have shrunk. We weren't allowed to go to museums. We couldn't see live music, right? And that's the beauty of, I think going into the world and seeing all the art that's been created through the centuries, not just the same albums and the same books that we're familiar with.
Right. I think I am one of those people that goes from like I'll be really interested in something, and then I'll be interested in another thing, and it just kind of you try to find these creative springboards that inspire you and keep you hungry, I guess is the best way I can say it, to keep you kind of wanting to explore new territory potentially. Like, you know, it's weird for me because the band started at a very certain point, and it was like it was great, and it's paid off for us. Um, but I think we all decided, we were like, that's not all we want to say.
Right.
You know, we could have made the same records over and over again, and there's nothing wrong with that. And people who do that, I don't have. It's not that they're wrong. It's just I feel like for us, like this band is extremely talented, and I think that there's so much more territory that we can explore, and subject matter that maybe is a little different, and inspiration. So and hopefully people connect with it, or yeah, maybe it does spring somebody. Yeah, this is just a huge advertisement for people to go to art museums. That's really
Yeah.
what this is. I don't know. I mean, whatever. But yeah, it's just to kind of be creative and maybe connect with somebody.
Let's go back to the founding of the band. I know you and Jesse, who plays bass, have been together a long time now. Um, you guys put together that first EP. I think it was a Greetings from St. Paul and the Broken Bones. It's sort of like a last ditch little farewell to like maybe this life of, well, we're gonna be in some bands and this is the last sort of little parting shot. And then, you know, you were going to school for accounting, I believe, and that was gonna be it. You know, I think a lot of us believe in our late 20s going into 30s, it's like this is time to really be
Right.
serious as a person, you know. I think you just met your wife, you know, it's like now we're gonna, you know, get serious about things. And then things start trickling in for you guys. And I remember being in that first wave of people who heard that stuff, you know, and all the stories, you know, start coming out of about you with like, well, he looks like this guy who shouldn't be able to sing like Otis Redding, which is like a bit redundant at a certain point,
Sure.
you know. But it's more than that. I think like seeing someone who can feel something that deeply on stage and be so fearless, you know, where you have to have a lack of shame in a way, like you have to risk almost falling off the stage, which I think you've done a few times, you know.
I have.
It's like a physical release that someone like me, who's maybe even a little less bold at times on stage, when I see folks like you, I go, you know, you can just get out there and like, what are you holding back? Like, what holding back for who? You know, like even at the Troubadour, our big show, you know, last weekend, which is why my voice is so shot. I got to the front of the riser there and like got on my knees for a second. I'm like, I've never done that. Like, and then I realized, can I get back up from this position? Like my knees are a little creaky right now. But like, what was the first moment, you know, and maybe it was when that Broken Bones and Pocket Change song started going around. What was the first moment where you realized this is something that I'm really going to do seriously and I'm going to dive headlong into it?
I think it was a process. It was kind of stages, right? It wasn't just like a kabam, let's do this, but I knew. So there were some people within Birmingham that were like, "Hey, we want to sign y'all," and I saw that enthusiasm. I was like, "Okay, well that's interesting." And we ended up not doing that, but
Right.
I could. So that was the first kind of telltale sign of like, okay, something's, you know what I mean? There's something here because you
Right.
got some of these local folks who are like, "Hey, you know," they're just very aggressive, and you know, luckily we were kind of smart enough to go, okay, let's just kind of wait and see, you know, let's see. And then um I remember selling out. There was this club in Birmingham called Bottle Tree Cafe, and it was like a 200 something cap room, and I interned there for a brief time. But it was Bottle Tree was this haven for people that just love music and kind of left of center music. It was curated really well, and it was just a magical place. Um, so we started playing there, and we played there like 4 times in a month, which, you know, as you know, is not a good idea if you're trying to like sell a place out. You know, you're thinning out your audience. But what we noticed is every time we played, there was more people showing up, and by that last time, we were actually the opener, um, and we sold the place out.
Yeah.
And the band that played after us was like, "Hey," and they knew, like, it's not one of those things, like they knew. They were like, "Oh," because you know when most of the audience leaves after you're done,
Yeah.
that's typically a sign. And I knew then, I was like, okay, this is about to turn into something a little bit more than just a Birmingham thing. And then we did some Nashville Music City roots and got a manager, and then you know then it kind of was off to the races from there. And then you know booking agents started being really interested, and that's when I knew. I was like, and that was about the time where I was working at Wells Fargo, and I knew then. I mean, we knew with that EP that we were going to have to see it through. You know, we just knew when we made it. They were like, we're just gonna, this thing needs a chance, whatever that looked like. And we didn't have a clue what that looked like. We just thought we need to put it out on Bandcamp. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think it was a process, and then you have each step, and then you achieve some things that you thought were never possible, and then you're like, okay, well, what's next? And you just kind of continue to be like, well, that would be kind of cool to do that, and so just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, and then the record that kind of put you on the map where people started really coming in, obviously, is Half the City, 2014. And um, I think the resurgence of soul music and funk as, I think, a bedrock of American music, I think, became solidified around that time.
Hmm.
A lot of bands, obviously, Alabama Shakes were coming around. The Alabama Shakes were rising to the top around that time. Ben Tanner helped make that record. Um, and there's really an amazing, I think, resurgence of authentic American songcraft, right? Because there's a lot of pop music, rock and roll that sort of, it flies into some sort of little genre bubble, right? And I feel like soul music is always current in a way, like it never is not cool, you know? But I think it takes a band, a big band with a large sound sometimes to really like remind people like this is awesome, you know? Um, you have a song, obviously like Call Me, that now it's not like necessarily a massive pop hit, but it's like, 40 million streams. You guys sold almost 100,000 records of that album. I mean, that's like a huge deal for a band that almost didn't exist several years before,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
that's
well,
it's inspiring.
actually, I think we've sold over 200,000 records of that record.
Tell the world, Paul.
I know everyone needs to know.
What I'm saying, initially when that was out the
Oh
first few
yeah, well,
years,
initially 100%.
like it,
Yeah.
it like came
Hmm.
not out of nowhere, but I'm saying like from a band that literally had a guy working at the bank, and then all of a sudden you're selling hundreds of thousands of records. That's hard to do in this sort of post
I think, yeah, I
iTunes
think,
world.
I think what was bizarre or what was interesting is I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because you got to think about it. Like I remember we were recording the EP and we were getting it done. We had kind of decided, and then I remember getting it done and then starting to hear some of the Shake stuff, and we were like, "Oh shit!" Like we thought we're thinking, "All right, this is gonna be our thing," and then we
Yeah.
heard that and we're like, "Oh, okay," and then luckily we're all friendly, but it was a really interesting thing when we heard that, but you got to remember, like they were around at that point, and so they had sold like they'd already gone gold, and like the rocket
Yeah.
ship was like strapped to them. So we just thought, oh, this is what happens. Like
Yeah.
John, you know what I mean? John Paul White is part of Single Lock, which was the label we on. He was with the Civil Wars, and like they had this massive success. So we were just like, oh, well, this must be what happens. Little did we
Yeah.
know how actually rare all of it was. But
Right.
we were just like, oh yeah. So we didn't really think we kind of felt like, oh, like we did a B maybe, and
Right.
and the folks around us were like doing A pluses, and so it was an interesting time, and I don't think I appreciated it at the time because I just thought, oh well, that's what happens, and not that I assumed that it happened everywhere, but it was just when you get that momentum, that's what happens, and I just didn't realize how rare that really was.
I love that question that someone asked you in an interview where they're like, growing up only listening to religious music, right, in a pretty strict household, when you first learned that that song "Call Me" was included in the 50 Shades of Grey soundtrack, but you're like, I just thought it was like a novel about people falling in love, like it was like
I
a
thought it was a
romance
rom
novel.
com. Yeah, I thought it was a rom com when they asked. And what was weird in that contract is they said they explicitly said non-sexual scene. I thought, well, that's odd. You don't really see that typically in a contract. Like, and I was not familiar. Um, that's one of the very few times that like so a lot of those aggregate sites like it went viral
Yeah.
because it said Christian singer, and I was like, well, I didn't say that. I didn't never really specified my religious status, but whatever. But I do remember, like, and I was like, sure, Elton John had known the director, and he had, I guess, put in a good word or made that happen or whatever, which was very kind. And he and so, but I was like, cool, it's great. And then I was in the movies watching a movie with my wife, and a trailer comes on for the movie, and I was just like, oh no, like this is not what I thought we signed up for. Which I was like, whatever, I mean, I didn't really care. It's not like it's some sort of terrible thing, but it was just I was not familiar. I thought it was a rom com, some sort of innocent movie. Should have probably paid a little bit more attention, but hey, I still would have put it in there.
I mean,
So it
it's a
doesn't really matter.
phenomenon. I mean,
Yeah,
it's people like your mom that probably got behind those books, right? It's like you never know the ladies in the little church groups, all of a sudden this is their one little adventure. They can go into this book and they can like have a little bit of a thrill.
yeah. I am 99.9% sure my mom, who I don't think I've ever seen a book besides the Bible.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
but you're right. It was like suburban moms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My sister worked at she was a cashier at the Books a Million
Uh-huh.
when that book came out, and it was always like suburban moms, and it's a uh, very interesting audience for sure.
There's a there's an article I read about you talking about, falling in love with some stuff you saw on MTV for the first time when you were like 8 or 9, like, AC/DC and Nirvana, stuff that was like a
Yeah,
little harder rock, right? And your mom obviously didn't allow you to like have that as at a young age, but in the house there was some Marvin Gaye, some Sam Cooke,
right.
and maybe like it's your mom's restrictions that put you into this more soul world instead of maybe you diving into like full on death metal
Yeah, I will. I mean,
area.
she told me because my cousin tried to give me a Nirvana CD, and it was Nevermind, and she saw it, and she took it away, and spanked me. And it's funny because later on, as this stuff was kind of happening, she's like, well, aren't you glad that I didn't let you listen to that? Like,
Yeah.
look where you are. And I'm like, well, I guess you're right. I don't, you
We'll never
know,
know.
I'll never know. But
Could have been the new Axl Rose.
yeah, yeah, I could have, I guess. But yeah, it worked out. I mean, I can't complain, I guess. It's not how I would raise my daughter, but um,
How old is your daughter?
she's 14 months. So
How's
a
it?
year.
How is it being a new dad? I'm about to have a kid in a month or so.
Oh,
So
are you
lay it
really?
on me.
Oh,
Give me the touring musician dad story.
so bizarrely, I mean, she was born September 2020,
Right.
so it's not
There you
like I
go.
was on the road a lot. It ended up being a fortunate thing for me. Um, I mean, it's interesting, It's an interesting journey. I mean, it's all the cliches that they say it is, and then it's kind of one of those big events that kind of happens. It's like when people want to diss the Beatles. The Beatles are just great. They just are great. It is what it is. Like it's going to be one of those moments it is beautiful, it is wonderful, it is, it's all those things, and you're not going to sleep, and you're going to get frustrated, and then you're going to be like, oh my god, I don't know if I can do this. And then your child is going to look at you and melt in your arms, and you're like, there's all these things. You go through an array of emotions. And then you also like kind of understand. It's like if you have a dog, right?
Uh-huh.
Like you could just send your dog outside and they can hang out. But like a child, they depend on you to live. So
Yeah.
you just have to do.
Right.
Um, but I think, I mean, so far, I mean, there's been there is she's all over the place. She wants to be into everything right now, and so it's been fun. It's been fun, but it's also been a challenge for sure. But yeah, I mean, it really is. It's all the cliches anybody tells you. And each experience is different. You know, each child is different. You know, my sister had a child 5 months after, and her child's very chill, like, you know, and my daughter is not chill. She's just very wants to be into everything and very
She's like
curious.
dad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you reap what you sow, but she wants to be into everything. So I hope that's a good sign. I don't know, but yeah, each kid's different, and each experience is different, and everyone kind of reacts to it differently. But it um definitely pretty wild.
By the time this comes out, actually, the baby will probably be like a week old,
Wow.
which is very surreal
Are
to think
you are
about
you
right now.
prepared? Yeah, you prepared and ready, and I
There's
mean,
been a steady stream of Amazon baby registry gifts coming
good.
without stop for the last month and a half. I don't actually know where we're putting all this stuff. Um, Actually, some of it is in the podcast area because there's nowhere else to
Oh, I get
put
it.
it.
I get it. I get
But
it.
when you put out an opening track of the new record like 3000 AD Mass, it's almost like, do you have to like protect your child from something this intense and possibly frightening?
um, she probably heard it because we were playing. I was playing demos in the car all the
Yeah.
time. Um,
She's like, what does fire and brimstone mean, Dad?
exactly. It is interesting to me because that doesn't seem intense to me because that's kind of what I grew up in. Um, I kind of compare that opening to like the preacher robot in Futurama is kind
Okay.
of like a Pentecostal preacher robot talking from the future.
But you have the
Um,
line, Lord, sink your teeth so I can feel it in my spine, right?
yeah,
It's like almost like horror movie vibes,
yeah,
but like this respect and awe you have for this figure, this force in the sky. And
yeah,
again, this record has this sort of view of this person, this isolated person searching into the heavens or like going into the heavens for more enlightenment and then finding that it might be more dark and crazy up there than it is down here.
yeah, yeah. It's that's one of my favorite lines in that song for sure. That's one of my favorite lines in the whole record. Um, so yeah, it's definitely searching and yeah, there's definitely a lot of darkness to the record for sure.
When you were a kid, was there a moment where you felt like, I know the voice and this talent and this power is inside me? Or was it something that you had to sort of work on throughout time?
I never really heard my voice recorded till I was 18, 19 years old. So I don't really, it's not like I was aware of anything, you know. And I went to an open mic night and it registered with people. And people were kind of like, oh, you gotta, you know, you can sing all right. And so then I was like, okay. But I've just kind of done what I've done, you know, like I never really, I don't, as a singer, I really don't feel like I've arrived to anything. I still am kind of like, I think I can do some things better and get better at it and really try and explore. You know, I don't. It's weird. Like I don't feel like a truly great singer at this point. I'm always kind of trying to achieve that with each song or each record we make. It's just one of those things. Um, I feel like you got to get. I have to get on stage on a nightly basis just to feel adequate as a singer.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. I mean, we all have kind of imposter syndrome to a degree, and I'm never kind of like I know that I can stay in key and I can do certain things, but I don't feel like a truly great singer, and I hope to get there. And you know, striving to, but who knows?
Do you have warm ups that you do to try to keep your voice in shape when you're really ripping it each night?
Yeah, I mean, I try to go through a routine. I don't always. I'm not as disciplined about it as I should be. Especially if like we're doing a 2 show run. It's like whatever. I will just go do whatever I want to do and
Right.
then be done. But if we're on tour and it's in-ear monitors really changed the game for me. Having to scream over an 8-piece band is really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and so that'll shred your voice pretty quick. So in ears, I can really kind of lean on the nuance. I move around a lot, and so having to figure out your breath and those things has been a little more complicated than I thought it would be.
Mm,
So once we get kind of a showdown, I kind of know what I need to do and where I need, kind of don't be crawling under the drum riser, on this song because you're not gonna be able to do it. And I would say this new record there's a few songs that are by far the hardest I've had to sing. Um, so we're gonna have to get a little creative in how we do it live.
well, that's the thing, man. Like, I find that the songs that I write in certain keys that push the limits of my range are the ones that feel most powerful
Sure.
live, right? Songs in D where you're really belting it, like I can barely get there. It's like Paul McCartney and Twist and Shout. It's like his voice is gone, but he just gets there. And it
Right.
feels like you're on the precipice, like about to jump off the cliff with him. And I have to like decide each night in this song, Sonic Boom, am I going to go falsetto during the chorus or am I going to really belt it? And it really depends how long we've been out, on the road. Like if
Sure.
my voice is feeling a little crisp or like feeling nice and juicy, and it's like not as powerful when you go falsetto for me. Like it just feels lame.
it can
Luckily,
it
I
can
have a lady singer who's a beast who can kind of like mask it because we're always singing mostly in tandem or harmony.
all
But
right.
you are basically on your own up there. If your voice starts to
Correct.
falter, the whole band falls apart. It's all
Right.
on you.
Yeah, it's I do wish we had some background singers for sure sometimes. It's just such a big band.
Yeah.
We got some guys that can kind of sing in the band. It's not like but it's just some of the stuff I've written is not exactly some of the easiest stuff to sing. So it gets hard. So um yeah, if you having a bad night, you're exposed and it is what it is. I always hate when that happens. You get a cold or
Yeah.
but that's all stuff we all deal with, I mean, any singer or anybody, they deal with that all the time. And there's a certain time of year in the summer that I usually have an allergy attack, and sometimes it's bad enough that we'll have to cancel the show, and sometimes I can get through it and I'm fine. But it just depends.
Do you remember a certain show where you were almost unable to sing, but you went through anyway? Like you gutted it
Um,
out?
well, there was a lot on those first runs that I should not have been singing at all. And had I had a ENT at the time, which I do now, they would have told me, "Don't you dare sing." That first record, interesting enough, like half the city, I can I can kind of get through it, even if I'm having a bad vocal day.
uh,
Um, I messed up and like wrote a lot of these other songs not that way, so it's a little bit more delicate. The one that comes to mind always. So I had an emergency appendectomy, and they went, the intubation or however you say it, the intubation tube went down my throat,
mm,
and and um, and I was in the hospital, and doctor was like, "Hey, you got to take 2 weeks off," and he had no clue what I did or anything.
right.
I said, "Sir, I got a show in 4 days in Chicago. I'm gonna go play that show." And
Uh-huh.
I would not recommend that. I would not recommend that. And I was just always you're always kind of taught like just rub some dirt on it and get through it, right?
Right.
You can't do that as a vocalist. It's a bad idea. And So I went to Chicago. I got through the show. I was struggling. I got through the show. And then the next day, I had to get up early and fly to Raleigh, North Carolina. And just throughout the day, my voice got continuously worse. And we had a doctor come, and he was going to put shots in my throat. But he was just like, he's like, son, he's like, you're not singing tonight. And so that's the only time I just like, nothing came out, not a
Yeah.
word. And so I flew home to my ENT. My ENT basically was like, look, had you figured out a way to get sound out of your mouth, you would have done permanent damage.
Yeah.
So, I always think about that. Like that Chicago show, I was like, should have done it. It's just stupid. I should have taken doctor's advice and just, but it's like the show must go on, right? And you just don't want to cancel. But I ended up having to cancel. It was the worst. We were in Raleigh and we had like 3,000 people
Ugh.
waiting for us. Like we opened doors, like, because I kept thinking I'll just sleep it off, sleep it off, sleep it
Yeah, yeah.
off, or honey, whatever I got to do.
Right.
And there was 3,000 people. We opened doors. There's 3,000 people waiting, and I
Ah,
can't sing. It was the worst. It was the worst. I
yeah.
got so many mean Instagram messages. So many. It was awful.
Come on,
It was
Raleigh.
terrible. It was awful, awful. Obviously, one was very drunk and was not happy. It was about one of the. I was like, man, I'd punch you in the face if I knew who you were. Like it was like I'm not faking. I'm not being a. I don't. It was weird, but yeah, I think about that a lot.
Well, speaking of maybe offending people, maybe in the South especially, when you put out Sea of Noise, right? Now it's a couple years after half the city is really taken off, but you've made a conscious decision to take a bit of a left turn, literally, maybe and figuratively, right? You read Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy, right? The social justice movement that is still continuing and really cresting right now is in the forefront of your mind, right? And again, people know you as the shouting preacher of soul with this big old band playing horns, and you want to bring them a song like I'll Be Your Woman, right? Where we start subverting gender norms, where we start having lyrics that maybe again are like foreshadowing the HB2 law in North Carolina, the sort of the bathroom laws and
Right.
actually saying things that even us hippies in California would be like, I'm not going to actually put that on my album. Right. And you're doing this in a place where the band is not fully famous yet, right? You're just sort
Right.
of coming into your own, and you're like, no, I'm going to take this stand now. Right. And maybe your band members were like, what are we doing? Like, are we sure we want to abandon this nice, comfortable ship that we're in? Where people are like, yeah, it's a horn soul band. That's what they do. They're a throwback sound, and that's it. Why did you want to take that turn, and were you afraid of the repercussions?
I'm
glad you did. I'm glad you did personally, but I'm sure at the time it took some courage,
Yes. Probably not as much courage as it takes a lot of other folks down here who have to deal with a lot of things. It moved me. I think this is the best way to say it. Like it's always something that's kind of been near and dear to my heart. It just felt like the time for me.
Right.
I think what I struggled with is like, so we had this success with Half the City, and I was like, okay, what do I say now? Like, what do I do now?
Right.
And obviously, we read the Brian Stevenson book, which Equal Justice Initiative is here in Alabama. We have the Southern Poverty Law Center. We have a lot of, I would say, more progressive and doing a lot of really great work in the state. And our state's not viewed that way at all, as it shouldn't be. I mean, predominantly the politics here are what everyone thinks they are. But it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like the right time. and the right thing to say, and it moved me. I mean, really, that's it causes creative um swell, and I was like, we have, we did something with the Justice Initiative, and Brian Stevenson was like, he was very kind, and he was just like, please keep saying what you're saying.
Right.
And that's encouraging. And you're like, okay, well, if someone like that who's done so much great work saying, hey, thank you, it's like, and it does. It means, I feel like it means a little bit more for people in Alabama to hear it with, someone from Alabama instead of, we always kind of joke, like when we were helping with the Doug Jones campaign, there's all these celebrities who want to fly down and help campaign. And Doug was just like,
Yeah.
no, like you
Right.
don't get it. Like that's not gonna help me. It's gonna hurt me. And I think about that. I just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you just moved, and that is, I don't, everybody gets kind of, I think now with politics and things like that, I think they get a little like, oh God. But I think for me, it wasn't even. I mean, I vote Democrat, but it wasn't even that. It was just a human issue, and it just felt like it
Right.
was the right. There's a lot of those are the things to me. Like you can label it however you want, but it's like being a good person and really applying those things. The idea of loving your neighbor and those things, like those to me are always going to appeal more. And I couldn't rectify, I couldn't justify. You just can't. Like I grew up that way, and it's like I never understood these stances. I don't feel like they come through a lens of love, and the idea of gender norms and things like that. I just thought I thought it was like this. I don't know. I wanted to go with it. I mean, to me, one of the scariest songs I wrote on that record is a song called Brain Matter.
Hmm.
And the song starts off with, "That's my daddy with a gun shooting someone else's son." And it's basically about being a white, son of a white police officer
Mm.
who kills someone. And the line is the color of a savior, because there's a lot of theories that, Jesus was from the Middle East.
Right.
And so um I that's a very scary. Yeah, when I was going this direction, there was definitely some like, oh shit, like are you about to torpedo our
Right. Because you
career?
because you live in that community, right? I mean,
Yes,
like,
right.
look, we've written songs in the last record or two about. There's a song about sort of how people used to attend lynchings as like a tourist event,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Or a song about the Parkland, Florida shooting we put on our newest record. We're 3,000 miles away from that, but we're moved by it. You're in that community with folks who don't agree with you,
Right.
probably, right?
Yep.
You have to deal
Mhm.
with that every day. I mean, a song like Bruised Fruit, right? You're talking about, you know, the blood, the DNA of this prejudice and this violence, right? Whether you want to admit it or not, right? It's like in a lot of us, right? And we're reckoning with that as a country where we have sort of worshiped our founding fathers or sort of the origins of our country that were built on the backs of slaves, right? It's like
Right.
we're just realizing that now for some reason, right? And obviously the critical race theory that's going through uh, all this discussion, or it's like the idea that we actually have to admit or accept that there is systemic racism, unconscious bias. Just that alone is really hard for people to realize. No one's even saying like you're a racist, horrible person. You're saying like this is within us. Can we admit that? Is that okay? And for a lot of people, it's not.
I think what is interesting is growing up in this state and growing up in this city, which has such a um horrible history, with the 63 Baptist church bombings, and the Children's March, that really changed the tide of the civil rights movement. You have that history here, and you either have to be blind
Right.
and ignore it, or you have to acknowledge it. And I think that is the one thing that people that are that understand that they do acknowledge it. You know what I mean? Like there is an acknowledgement. It's not pretty. It's not beautiful. You know what I mean? And like
Right.
it but I do think people kind of understand that that you have to come to terms with it here.
Yeah.
If you really are looking and seeking, you have to come to terms with it here. I think, and this is no knock on Vermont, but Vermont is a predominantly white area that,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like they don't have the same, it's not the same thing. Not saying that there's not issues there, but it's not the same thing.
But what's interesting though is that Vermont and New Hampshire are right next to each other, both these little slivers of sort of, mostly rural, beautiful place, obviously. But like New
Right.
Hampshire is much different politically than Vermont, right?
Right.
Like it barely goes blue each election season, right?
Right.
And you're like, well, how can they be that different? They're both right there, but it's a conscious choice that a lot of voters up there and maybe the Bernie influence, whatever, have made over the years that like, no, social justice and awareness of hardship for minorities, et cetera, like that's important to us. Whereas New
Sure.
Hampshire's like, I don't know, live free or die, motherfucker,
Yeah,
and it's like, it's real. I mean, it's just like amazing how different just these little slivers of location are in
well,
the
and
United
and and
States.
for and for me, the one thing I will say that does help living here and believing what I believe, you do appreciate at times what you got to take a stand, but there are things that you go. There are some compromises where you kind of go with certain things. Now, when it comes to kind of social justice, things like that, to me, but that's not even political. That's
Right.
the one thing that is frustrating for me. Is like I've never viewed that as a political thing. If you want to say we need less taxes or we need more taxes or you know what I mean, like things like that,
Mm-hmm.
healthcare or whatever, that's fine. Privatization over those are over, federal stuff, like that's fine. Those are arguments that have been made for longer than this country has existed.
Right.
So that I can go with. When you come to those kind of more human rights and social justice issues, like it's not political for me. It's right and wrong. And I think are there different theories on how to help? Sure. That's fair. But there's just to me, some of that is like it's just right or wrong. And I think that's where it's always just kind of goofy for me. And I know everything is politicized now, and you know, you end up if you're on social media, you end up talking. You know what I mean? You end up talking to one
Right.
side or the other. It's like, and it's just ridiculous. There are just certain things that are just like that. It's like, hey, yes, yeah, we can. Why are we not all agreeing on this?
Right.
And it's bizarre.
Well, you have a song like Got It Bad on Young Sick Camellia, right? It's like you're talking about subverting what Southern pride is,
Right.
because there's this sort of like, we do it our way and don't tell us what to do. And we have this pride that it's like, well, what are you proud of? And what does that mean? Right. I mean, look, the title of the album is sort of subverting the like state flower, right,
Right.
of Alabama, this sort of beautiful flower that has withered or has been rotting from the inside somehow, right?
Right.
And again, like as something to lead with, pretty intense,
Right.
pretty bleak. I'm sure like maybe your manager, your PR people are like, is there another title we can go with? Like,
Yeah, they were definitely the title for that one was definitely of great angst for
and then
sure.
you're like, have you looked at Caravaggio recently? Because
Yeah,
I have.
I don't think I cared, but yeah, it was. I definitely remember the label kind of being like, "What?" And then no one could spell camellia right. It was a really interesting. And they didn't understand like why camellia, and I had to explain it. And um, but to be fair to them, they did get on board and they were great with it. So can't really complain too much. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, but that song is like a dance song that is pretty heavy
Yeah.
lyrically. So that's us.
But a single like Apollo, I think actually is foreshadowing this record, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I
It's
think
like
Apollo was the one that was like, yeah, I think it was definitely telegraphing what we were going to do next. I mean, Popcorn Ceiling, you mentioned a song like that, like
right.
it's even like I almost think like this weird thing happens at the beginning of the record, and then at Popcorn Ceiling is kind of like the extension of
Uh-huh.
Apollo. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was kind of written that way. Not that anyone's going to give a shit, but I care. So, but yeah, no, I think that's a very fair, because there's even references to lines from Apollo in Popcorn Ceiling. It's kind of got there's a call and response there.
Well, yeah, it's like the human animal being transfixed by space, trying to elevate his brain into another dimension in a way.
Right.
And um, I know you said that maybe was the one kind of love song that you wrote your wife. Was she impressed, or did she want something a little more openly romantic?
She always tells me, like, why does there always have to be like a darkness? Why does someone have to be dying or something? I'm like, that's fair.
What is your song? Do you have a song with your wife, like when you first started dating?
Um, I mean, we have a record. It's kind of our record. It's a Tom Waits Mule Variations. It's
Pretty
kind of
freaking dark.
yeah, exactly.
So good though.
It's a great record. There was some Otis Redding tunes. I mean, Cigarettes and Coffee, and then uh, some Sam Cooke stuff that we really, was kind of our stuff. So, but yeah, we did that record is one that we always kind of go to. Um, but I would say on this new record, "Love Letter from a Red Roof Inn" is kind of a love song.
Right.
So it's there.
What's interesting about some of those songs like Red Roof Inn is that you have less verse chorus structure, right?
Mm, right.
It's a little more open ended. If you look at the lyrics that your publicist sent me, it's almost like an E. E. Cummings poem, right?
Sure.
There's like lines kind of floating on their own, right? There's no resolve, right? There's
Right.
no hook necessarily, you know? It's like this is a moment in time that we're going to capture with this
Yeah, it's a vibe. I
sound.
mean, really, that's
Right.
what it is. It's a vibe.
Um, was there something that inspired you to start creating music in that way? Was there an album, a song that you're like, this is something that I want to try to do myself?
I think a lot of like cool, like some of that Frank Ocean stuff. Um, there's a lot of like really great R&B records that even like some hip hop stuff, like some of the Kendrick stuff and stuff like that. And then there's like jazz and kind of concept like Radiohead stuff that, yeah, this it's more about the vibe of the song more so than like, oh, we got to have verse chorus this, it's like capturing a moment. Um so I think we were just kind of feeling and just kind of where the inspiration took us, and that song was actually a demo that our saxophone player Amari put in the Dropbox, and I just really loved it, and so we just kind of ran with it and figured out what we were going to do, and that kind of thing.
Can you tell us who the personnel is in your band right now?
You want names?
Yeah, what they play and
So right now, so we have Jesse Phillips, who on the record played bass and then played some guitar, and then Browan Lawler, who's the guitar player, but also he did all sorts of stuff on the new record. Al Gamble, who is an amazing keys player. I mean, if it has keys on it, Al can make it sound amazing. It's fun. It's funny because Al is legitimately one of the best Hammond B3 players on the planet. Like legitimately,
Yeah.
there's no two ways about it. And we past couple records have kind of been like, yeah, that's good. Can you play a synthesizer? And so it's you know,
What?
uh I know he's I mean he's taken to it like fish and water. Like he has been amazing. I'm actually just I'm proud of him because he could just be like, no man, I can make, but he like he gets in there. You get the Moog and all that stuff, and it's been pretty amazing. And then we've got Kevin Leon on drums, and he did he actually on the record like play some keys and just an amazing musician. And then we have on Amari Ansari on saxophone, and he also plays the synth. I mean, during the show now, because this is not a real horn heavy record. Um, I think for them as well, like the guys who were the quote quote horn section, they wanted to be like, hey, we're musicians, like we're more
Right.
than just horn players, and they are. They're incredible musicians. So he's playing some synthesizer in the show, and then Alan Branstetter, our trumpet player, he's also playing guitar in the show now. And then Chad Fisher, our trombone player, he's playing keys, and it's been a lot of fun because now we've gotten to really expand the sound, and those guys have really kind of got to stretch out and really show people that like they are immensely talented. They are
Yeah.
immensely talented and multifaceted in what they can do. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of watch them grow as well.
When you opened for the Rolling Stones, was there a song that you were like, I have to play this song, hoping that maybe Mick and Keith would see it?
Well, uh, it was encouraged to us through Keith that he would love to hear an Otis Redding song. So we played "I've Been Loving You Too Long" one time, and then we played "Try a Little Tenderness" another time. And yeah, they were side stage watching the show, uh, which is pretty surreal, But I didn't grow up with the Rolling Stones, so it was for me. I was kind of, I mean, I get that it was a big deal, but I think some of the other guys were shitting their
Yeah.
pants. And so I just kind of like I just did the show, but yeah, it was strongly encouraged for us to do that. That would make some of the folks happy. Which we know that stuff like the back of our hands. So we were like, sure. And we have a really great relationship with the Reddick family. So we were like, yeah. And yeah, it was pretty funny because Keith was a fan, and we talked about Otis Redding and Tom Waits, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, that was it's just a surreal thing. But yeah, no, they watched the show for sure.
Let's say you could create a St. Paul and the Broken Bones magical roadshow. Somehow you have the ability to book 5 artists with you, dead or alive, from any point in history.
Wow.
Who would be on that tour?
Whew. Man, it's so hard. Um, as long as we're opening the show, I would, because there are like, I mean, Prince would be on my list, but there is
All
no
right.
way in hell that I would want to follow Prince, as I assume nobody would want to.
All right, he's the closer.
Yeah, he's definitely the closer. I mean, really, my list would be like Prince, um, Sam and Dave. I heard like I've read books and talked to people that like that Sam and Dave show was incredible. Like one would pass out and like they would like just incredible. I mean, Otis Redding, I think, said like, I don't want them to ever open up for me again because I can't follow it. So I've always wanted to just like see that in full action,
Okay.
like to see how it was. I think something like Tom Waits would be amazing. Radiohead. That last one would be, I don't know, it'd be really tough. Um, Marvin Gaye.
Done.
There you go. That would be my dream. I don't even know what I would do. My head would explode.
Have you considered getting a hype man for your shows who just lays like a cape over you at the end, like James Brown?
We did at one point think about, we've really thought about this. It was a part in the show early on where I would fake like I had a heart attack and die. And we thought it would be really funny to get people to get like dressed as like nurses and stuff,
Okay.
and get a fake defibrillator and come out and like pump me and then I rise up. But then we were like, that could scare the shit out of people.
Yeah.
But it would have to be very obvious that it was put on. Um, but we thought about that for a really long time. Have we been able to hire somebody? We would have. Besides that, though, I know this is weird, but like it is a band. So I don't like, yeah, I perform and I do the thing. But I've always like, for me, like, I'm always going to do crazy shit. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know. I've always just, yeah, I don't know, with the James Brown kind of thing. Like, we definitely could do that. But I've always just been like, you know, I don't need a hype man. I just go in there and band plays, I come out or whatever. But I've just always very much viewed it as a band situation. So, I guess everybody would need a hype man, right?
From the time where I talked to you and you were leaving the bank to this moment, is there a show, a festival, a moment that you can remember where peak rock star energy was achieved? Like, I feel like we all have that one show where it's like all of a sudden you're on stage, the lights are hitting you from every direction. I think for me, it was like we played a festival in Norway. Like, it was just so bizarre. It made no sense. And you're like, whatever this is. And that's the melancholy part of it, is that like, I don't think there's ever been that energy ever again. Right.
Right. Right.
You're like, if we could just get that energy back from that one tent in Norway.
That we have been very fortunate that that bar has been like set many times. And so we're like, no, that's that, no, that. The first one was that first Bonnaroo show because I had worked security at Bonnaroo.
Okay.
We played an early day and it was packed. That was a special show. I mean, I'm like crying because I was like, how in the hell did I get here?
Right.
It was really magical. That was a magical show. So that for a long time was the kind of like, that was the one. And then the first time we played the Ryman was really special. But the one that we still to this day, I don't think has been topped. And it's also overseas. Like we played this festival called Colors of Ostrava in the Czech Republic.
Oh.
And it was like 25,000 people. We've never played in the Czech Republic. It's not something we've done before.
Right.
We get on stage. We have in-ear monitors, and I'm still having a hard time hearing the band. It was the only time, when you see those like clips of Queen at Wembley.
Yeah.
That's the only time I have ever felt like that. It was insane. I'm talking about people were in the whole show. They were cheering so loud, like they were cheering to the point where we couldn't like play because we couldn't hear.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and we all were just, because we were in total shock because we had never played. Like we were just like, hey, we're playing a festival, playing in a place we've never played. And to this day, I don't think that's been topped. It was just, you couldn't hear anything. The crowd was incredibly loud. They were so like, they wanted like encores and all that shit, and which is like a no at festivals. It was insane. Like there was an electricity I still don't know. I don't know if you ever replicate that.
And that takes a lot because I mean, I did a film program in Prague for a summer, and the Czech people are a very like serious, like
I don't know what it was that day.
Hard to impress, like Soviet hardened people. And I think when they let loose, they like really let loose.
It was, I'm telling you, man, it was one of those. I was like, like we didn't even have merch. Like our merch guy was there, and he was like selling merch in the front row,
Yeah.
and like he couldn't keep stuff. It was
Right.
like one of those like I thought there was like a joke. I thought someone was
Yeah.
in on something, and um, that is the show we think about all the time. I mean,
That's awesome.
that's been the one that we all kind of talk about. And what's the bummer is like some of the crew and folks who came later were not a
Yeah.
part of that show. We talk about that show, and
Yeah.
you just feel bad. You're like,
Yeah.
it is in our lore.
Yeah.
It is the pinnacle.
Well, I think like, yeah, seeing bands, I think like you again come from just a place where you're starting from literally nothing, right?
Right.
You put in a lot of hard work and you actually see the fruits of your labor, right? That's something that I think a lot of pop music does not have, right? It's like you're sort of
Right.
anointed really quick flash and then you're gone. And I think you guys have something that's very sustainable. I know it's exhausting probably at a certain point, especially now that you have a young daughter. But I think like when I see St. Paul, you're going to be playing at the Ace, I think in LA soon, and be like, okay, I'm going to put that on my calendar. It's like something worth setting aside, right? And that's like, I think a special thing that you guys have created. What is the song on the new record that if you were to play the first music festival on Mars, you have to open with one song off the new record?
Oh
Take us out.
man.
Which song?
I would on Mars. That changes things. It would either be the single "Last Dance" or it would be the song "Tin Men Love," which is
All right.
such a weird offbeat kind of song. It was written by a drummer, so that tells you everything you need to know. Um, so it would either be one of those two.
Oily fields and neon flowers bloom. Does Jesus cry when robots lose their lives? Waiting for the rhyme. Do I even care what's about to come? I just wish I could run into the sun. It's probably very
Yeah,
cold on Mars, so
I
that
know.
line
Yeah, that's
makes sense.
fair. That's fair. That's fair. It's just a weird song. It feels like an alien song.
Well, I'm glad we could do this, man. I'm sure we'll see you out and about soon.
Very soon, man. We're getting cranked up. It is getting started very quick, very soon. So I'm
And
just trying to get
congrats
every.
on the a new record, man.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right, bud. We'll keep up the good work.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. I think eventually just send whatever audio you have to you can send it to show on the road pod at Gmail. That might be
Okay.
helpful. No huge rush, but whenever you want to do that on, either Dropbox or something like that.
Yeah, all good. I will. What I will do, because y'all are not the only ones that have done this.
Right.
It's a thing, I guess. It makes sense, I guess, because you can't you don't want to hear the audio out of this. But
Well, I mean,
yeah,
the Zoom audio is like a backup, or sometimes I'll use it as if we're like overlapping and stuff. But like, yeah, the sound quality is much better if we're individually mixed for sure.
interesting. Sounds good.
All right, man.
Are y'all playing a lot of shows right now?
Um, we just did the sort of last Troubadour show, just sort of wrapping things up. We're playing it in New Year's in Denver, and
Not bad.
that's about it for.
Where y'all
I mean, I
playing?
I do have to take a little time off since my wife is having a child.
Whatever. Yeah, just plow through it. It's really it'll go well for you.
I'm sure she'll love that. Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff in March with what's the band Infamous String Dusters. We're playing.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think you know how it goes. There's a lot of stuff that got canceled 3-4 times. That is, I know we're playing in like England in July of next year. Maybe that looks like that's happening. But it's like they've said that the last 2 years. So I don't know.
I know. We have stuff in January or in early February over there, and I'm just like we'll see.
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, the problem is like you buy the travel to get over there, and you're like putting a
We have
lot. I
still
mean,
not bought the tickets, which is I
yeah,
mean, just because we're like,
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know with this new variant. I don't know what's going to happen. But
Well, get boosted, you'll be all right.
Oh, I boosted, man. I'm ready to go. I was going to London. I was supposed to be in London right now. I
Yeah.
was like, I am getting boosted. So,
Yeah.
anyway, awesome, man. Well,
All
thank
right,
you.
man. Go Barons.
Yeah, go Barons. All right, see you.
Produce us some top talent. 'cause, you
Let's
know,
hope. Let's hope.
we need it. All right, man. We'll see you soon.
All right, thank you, man.
All right.